This is Ecotopia on KZFR 90.1 in Chico, and with us on the phone now is Guy McPherson, a leading expert on abrupt climate change leading to near-term human extinction. He's a professor emeritus of conservation biology at the University of Arizona. He's the author of over a dozen books and scholarly articles. He's a public speaker, blogger, and cultural critic. His new book is Only Love Remains, Dancing at the Edge of Extinction. Welcome, Guy McPherson.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to chat with you again.
Thank you. So what was your purpose in writing Only Love Remains, Dancing at the Edge of Extinction?
I just wanted to point out to people a couple of things. One, we are at the edge of extinction. There are several ways that we could lose habitat for Homo sapiens in the very near future. And I also wanted to point out that there is a way to receive this information, to take in this information that doesn't involve despair, that instead involves action, despite the outcome probably being horrible, and also to live with joy, to be hope-free and to live with joy. We can work through our grief and we can get to the period of living in the moment every day joyfully. So those are the primary goals of writing the book.
I'm really curious, and looking at your history, we looked at the titles of your books over the years since 1990 and noticed how much your writing topics have changed over the years. They seem almost like a biography of your life. Can you describe how your writing has changed and how the various books that you have written reflect an evolution in your thinking and in your purpose?
Yes, I think I think you nailed it exactly, and that's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking it. When I started, my first book was in 1990, and it was a glossary. How many people can say they wrote a dictionary ever? So that was kind of interesting, and it reflected, at the time, I was a brand new tenure-track assistant professor, and there was this crying need to link together the terminology used in managing fires and other large incidents with new terminology that was broader and could be applied to several incidents, not just fire. And so it was pure grunt work. So I just dived in. I started when I was a postdoc. I just dived in, got these dictionaries, began typing and retyping and seeking information and resubmitting. And so really it was just, it was pure physical labor in front of a keyboard. And then my next book was called Ecology and Management of North American Savannas. I wrote it while I took my first sabbatical leave from the University of Arizona in Berkeley, California, where I was on the faculty at the University of California, Berkeley. And by that time, I had been working on North American savannas for quite some time, a plant community largely unrecognized by the ecological community. And so I wanted to summarize my work up to that point on this important topic. And then I returned to my roots in anthropogenic climate change, worked on that for a while. And you're right, over time, my purposes have expanded, my knowledge has broadened. As one example, my latest peer-reviewed journal article appeared in the journal Clinical Psychology Forum, and it's called Becoming Hope-Free, and it points out the parallels between how medical doctors acted in the past when they would lie to their patients in the name of giving them hope, and how governments and corporations and paid climate scientists are acting today, lying to people to give them hope about our terminal diagnosis as a species. So it's been quite an evolutionary change over the course of 30 years or so.
Interesting.
We want to ask specifically how close we are to the edge of extinction. The UN Intergovernmental Panel said if we don't reform our ways by 2030, there will be drastic consequences. You have a considerably more pessimistic view of that. Could you give us your view of the edge of extinction?
Yeah, we're in the midst of the sixth mass extinction, and the previous 5 have taken out most complex life on Earth. In addition, there are a handful of ways that I have detailed recently on my blog, GuyMcPherson.com, by which we could lose habitat for our species in a very short period of time, literally within a matter of days. I'm not predicting that will happen, but we could lose habitat for our species in a very short period of time. A more likely scenario has us losing habitat for our species when, for example, we experience a profound reduction in grain crops. And you look at what's going on with the land hurricane in the central United States right now, we could be experiencing profoundly reduced crop availability over the course of the next coming months and years. And this civilization, like all previous versions, depends upon the ability to grow, store, and distribute grains at scale. If we can no longer do that, then the civilization is severely threatened. And when civilization goes away, interestingly enough, the planet heats up even faster. So this is one of the paradoxes that we are within. If we continue industrial activity, of course that heats the planet further. We know this because we know about greenhouse gases. On the other hand, decreased industrial activity also heats the planet and does so even faster as a result of the loss of something called the aerosol masking effect, or global dimming. So doomed if you do, doomed if you don't, so to speak.
Good one. So at the end of your book, I must say it was difficult to read some parts of your book. You said that you dismiss hope altogether.
Yes, I think hope is a terrible idea. It really runs counter to what we've been taught and what we assume to be true in this society. So let me give you a comment, first of all, from Stephen Jenkinson, who throughout his entire adult life has been involved in what he calls the death trade. Stephen Jenkinson writes, "The great enemy of grief is hope. Hope is the 4-letter word for people who are unwilling to know things for what they are. Our time requires us to be hope-free, to burn through the false choice of being hopeful and hopeless. They are two sides of the same con job. Grief is required to proceed." And then in my latest peer-reviewed journal article, I indicate that the belief in a positive future, which is what hope is not useful when presenting a person with a terminal diagnosis. And so then I draw a parallel between what medical doctors did with full support of the medical ethicists community in the 1960s and 1970s, when medical doctors actually, in the name of hope, lied to their patients. They wouldn't tell them the truth about their terminal diagnosis. We see the same thing today with the corporate media, with the governments of the world, with most paid climate scientists, choosing hope about our future instead of reminding people that really we're on the verge of hospice, we're on the verge of human extinction. And so hospice, which is obviously a particularly effective strategy for palliative end-of-life care, can also be a strategy for addressing the near-term demise of Homo sapiens.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the role of science in your findings. You quote Jenkinson, to know things for what they are. The Buddhists would have some questions about what that statement means. And you have a lot of scientific evidence for your predictions. We've talked some with Paul Ehrlich. I think you were involved with the mob public discussion over the weekend. Paul says that people are not capable of understanding science. They haven't been well enough educated for it, that people can't understand the findings of science. On the other hand, we also know that science is a rhetorical act in many ways. There's a lot of writing out there about he or she who tells the best story gets the best federal funding and so forth. What's your view, Guy, of science seeing things as they really are, and particularly the science that you've employed in your book?
Well, yeah, I'm a conservation biologist, as is Paul Ehrlich. And he's one of the co-authors of 2 papers that have come out within the last 4 years. The first of those came out with the senior author, Geraldo Ceballos, and it was in Science Advances in June of 2015, and it pointed out that we have entered the sixth mass extinction. The second paper, Ceballos and colleagues again, this time July 2017, in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And the title of that paper is Biological Annihilation by this ongoing sixth mass extinction. So we're clearly within the sixth mass extinction at that point. Paul Ehrlich, when interviewed, coincident with the release of that paper, spoke to the interviewer and said, quote, "We're toxifying the entire planet." So we know we're in the midst of the sixth mass extinction, and we know that previous mass extinction events, the previous 5, have taken out most complex life on the planet, and that it has taken millions of years to recover. We also know, because we are human animals, that as with other animals, we depend upon habitat for our own survival. We're right now at the highest global average temperature with our species on the planet. So that's why I'm surprised that we're here still. I'm surprised we haven't seen grain crop failure as a result of overheating of the planet. I'm surprised that we haven't tipped beyond these many tipping points that we've triggered in a way that would take us beyond the ability to grow, store, and distribute grains at scale. So I'm joyfully surprised that we're able to have this conversation, that we're still walking around and carrying out electronic communications like this one.
You've become a grief specialist. I want to just shift directions a little bit here. You did some study of grief work, and I know that's a lot about healing relationships. How has grief study helped you? What have you had to deal with where grief studies have helped you?
Interestingly, when I participated in a 4-day workshop put on by the Grief Recovery Institute and thereby became a grief recovery specialist with the Grief Recovery Institute, I didn't know what grief was. It's one of those things we just don't talk about in this society. So I didn't know what it was. And we were about an hour into that workshop, and the definition was provided by the facilitator of the workshop, and it was perfect, and it clarified for me immediately the feelings I was experiencing. The Grief Recovery Institute defines grief as wishing for a different past. Let me unpack that a little bit. What they mean is let's take an example. When a parent dies, for example, and you have a while to come to grips with that death. Say a parent has cancer, and so you know that you have weeks or months with this person still in your life. And so what do? When you're in the hospice, you seek to make that person comfortable, and you also are given time to have the conversations that you never had before. You get to apologize. You get to seek forgiveness. You get to tell somebody you love them. You get to have these conversations when somebody has come to grips with their own demise that we typically do not have. What drives grief, what underlies grief, is this wishing for a different past that comes because you did not complete that relationship, because you did not get to say all those things you wanted to say before this person left your life. It's not necessarily through dying. It can be through divorce or a breakup. It can be because somebody moved away, because you changed jobs. There's all kinds of sources of grief, of sources of loss, really, that disallow us from completing a relationship in a meaningful way. Once I realized that that's what I was dealing with, that that's what I was experiencing, was altered relationships with the people in my life, then I was able to complete a few exercises to complete those relationships and move on, change the nature of the relationships. So, for example, I had a relationship that had become adversarial with a family member. I was able to complete a few relatively simple, straightforward exercises to complete those relationships, put them down on paper, not send the papers to the person because it would just confuse them, and then change the nature of the relationship. So now I talk with the person and have superficial conversation with them, but it's not nearly as intimate as it once was. And that's okay. I was able to complete the relationship in a way that was meaningful for me. Now my partner and I have developed a workshop that allows people to do the same thing, taking advantage of anticipatory grief or the demise of a relationship, in this case with the natural world. So we anticipate, we can see what's going on already, and at some point, much of the world that we hold dear will be gone. How do we deal with that? So we have adopted our Only Love Remains workshop to deal not just with interpersonal relationships, but also with the living planet that provides so much to all of us.
The subtitle of your book is Dancing on the Edge of Extinction. Do you dance?
I do. And I've danced for a long time, since actually I was a small child. I still have a photograph that somebody took of my family, and I have an older brother and a younger sister and parents who had 3 children when they were mere children themselves. And my mom made us all shirts, checked shirts with pearl buttons to go square dancing in.
All right.
My parents routinely square danced because we were in a small human community in northern Idaho, a fairly remote region, and so this is a way for the members of the community to gather together once every month or so and have a social occasion. And so I began square dancing when I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and I've been dancing, folk dancing, country swing, so on, really ever since. I never got away from it. So it's one of those things that I could use occasionally to impress my students on campus when we would go to a meeting of a scientific society, and there'd be a band playing, and I would go out with somebody and start dancing. They go, "Oh my God, that's Professor McPherson, and he knows how to dance."
So is that how you're planning to go out? Is that your ending?
I wish. That's my great dream anyway, is that at the end I will be able to do what I'm doing now. And I think that's one of the advantages of my coming to grips with what I've known was coming for a long time, just based on the way we as a society have treated the planet. So I would love to think that in my final days I will still be dancing. Obviously we can't predict with accuracy how each of us individually is going to die. So I don't know if it'll be dehydration or starvation or at the wrong end of a gun. We don't know how this is going to play out, but I would like to think that I either die from over dancing or from having sex. Those would be my 2 favorite choices.
We have a young woman we're interviewing after we talked to you tonight, and she's a student. She's a part of the Sunrise Movement, and you probably have heard of it. It's a youth-led climate movement, and they're currently touring to support the Green New Deal. I don't know if these young people feel hope, but what advice do you have for these young people? Are they foolish to have hope? How should they or how should we spend our time in these end times?
I'm a huge fan of taking action, and I applaud these young people in the Sunrise Movement for their actions. However, I think that they are not fully informed, and following the principles of Buddhism, and I'm not a Buddhist, I believe that we should not be attached to the outcome of our actions. So I believe that these young people are on the right track. At the very least, they are able to converse with people, interact with people who share similar values with them. And I think a next obvious step for them should be to acknowledge that since at least the 1960s with the American Cultural Revolution, there have been young people trying to change the system. And the system has definitely changed. It's gotten worse with every passing year, with every passing 4-year term of a president in office. So I think it's important to not be attached to the outcome of our actions, but still to take our actions very seriously, to do what coincides with our values. So good for them, and don't be too attached to the outcome, because we're in the midst of the sixth mass extinction. We're in the midst of abrupt, irreversible climate change, and it's not. I suspect it's not going to turn out well. Is that any reason to not take action? No, absolutely not. I've been taking radical action my entire life, and most notably in the last dozen years or so, when I transitioned to living off grid and taking the kinds of actions that very few other people were were willing to take, abandoning the monetary system, for example, some 10 years ago. So it's important to take action. It's important to not be attached to the outcome, because I can't imagine this turning out well, and especially if we don't take action.
Tell us a little bit more about other ways that people can learn about what you're doing. You're still writing, you're still touring, you're still doing interviews, you're still blogging, I think?
Yes, I am at GuyMcPherson.com.
Uh-huh.
And I'm on a speaking tour right now. I'm in, where am I? Colfax, California.
Oh, Colfax.
And headed soon to Chico.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes,
so
you will be here soon.
Began in Alaska and will wrap up in Portland, Oregon, after landing in San Jose a couple of weeks ago. So I'm still teaching in the way that is available to me. I'm still demonstrating to people that there are actions we can take. For me, those actions are returning to my roots as a teacher. I'm frequently accused of not taking action, and yet I'm doing the action that many people thought was honorable when I was paid for it as a professor. But now that I'm professor emeritus and I'm not paid for it, apparently this equates to no action. I'm basically doing the same thing I've been doing for the last 30 years or so.
So tell us about your visit to Chico. When and where will you be?
I will be at the Pageant Theater, and I'm looking up right now when that is, because
we failed to look that up in advance of the show. We know it's shortly. Sorry.
Yeah, that'll be at on the 28th at 7 p.m. at the Pageant Theater, and it will be, if all goes according to plan, it will be an overview of the past and likely near-term climate change, abrupt climate change, where that is leading to, what we can do at the level of individuals, families, communities, and so on, in light of this particularly dire diagnosis. I'll also be at Blackbird Books the 29th at 6 p.m.
So that's Sunday and Monday. This coming Sunday and this Monday, the pageant at 7 o'clock on Sunday night, and the Blackbird on Monday night, right?
Yes, and if you go to the Coming Events tab at GuyMcPherson.com, you'll be able to get all the details on, and I think you'll be able to get Eventbrite tickets if you want to insure your slot, because the pageant is an especially small venue.
Yeah.
I think there are 88 chairs or something like that. So yes, if you want to check it out, get the details, find the address, and so on, you go to Coming Events at GuyMcPherson.com. It'll take you right there.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Guy McPherson. His new book, Only Love Remains, Dancing at the Edge of Extinction, is published by Wood Thrush Productions. This is KZFR 90.1 Chico. Stay with us. After the break, we'll be talking about the Sunrise Movement with Sophia Lepore. Now, here's Bill Mash with our Climate Uprising Update.
Thank you again. Nice talking with you again.
Likewise.
Bye.